Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I came home to find a concrete road cutting through my pasture like a scar, complete with solar lights, gates, and HOA signs. No warning, no consent. Just theft in broad daylight. They thought I'd roll over. They had no idea they'd just declared war on the wrong man. I returned home on a Thursday evening, sun hanging low over the Tennessee hills, casting long shadows across the pastures. The gravel crunched under my tires as I turned onto the familiar path toward my house, or at least what should have been the path. I hit the brakes, hard. There, cutting straight through the center of my 20-acre property, was a goddamn concrete road. Not a dirt path, not some temporary gravel trail for utility access. Number: a fully paved, freshly poured 10 to 12 foot wide slab of reinforced concrete that ran from the eastern tree line all the way across my pasture and disappeared behind a hill. It split my land like a knife across a steak. There were solar-powered lights installed every 20 feet along its length. Brand new ones, still had the protective wrap on the base. And in case that wasn't enough of a middle finger, 3 metal signs stuck out of the grass near the entry point. HOA, private access, no trespassing. I sat there in the driver's seat for maybe 30 seconds, blinking, just blinking. Like maybe if I stared long enough, it would disappear. But nope, concrete doesn't flinch. I got out, boots sinking into the edge of the muddy tire ruts left by some heavy equipment. I followed them with my eyes, clear bulldozer tracks, backhoe prints, and what looked like a cement truck's distinctive zigzag wheels. Someone had brought in machinery, poured a damn road, and never even bothered to tell me. The old livestock gate I'd put up 3 months ago was gone, ripped out. Only a broken hinge remained, dangling off a splintered post. My fencing was down in 3 sections, coiled up neatly and stacked in a pile nearby, like someone had the decency to store it after committing felony-level trespassing. I felt my jaw clench so hard I heard something click. I walked the length of the road checking where it intersected with my pasture and came to a dead end behind the ridge. There it met up with an undeveloped lot in the new residential sector, Aspen Ridge, one of those HOA-run mini-villages filled with identical beige boxes and smug retirees who think bylaws are the 10 Commandments. That's when I saw the cherry on top. Someone had installed a keypad gate on my side where the concrete met the open pasture, a metal swing gate, wired, stamped with a maple leaf logo, HOA branding, on my land. I felt something settle in my chest. Cold, heavy, not panic, not confusion. No, this was deeper, calculated. It was the feeling I used to get back when I was working in the zoning enforcement department and found a contractor trying to slip an unpermitted gas line through a wetland. It was the quiet certainty that someone thought they were smarter than the law. And worse, they thought I wouldn't notice. Back at the house, I checked my mailbox. No letters, no notice, no permits. Just one soggy flyer for a local church pancake breakfast and a torn coupon for mulch. Nothing from any contractor, nothing from the HOA. Inside, I powered up my desktop and opened the security camera system. The feed was dead. All 8 cameras offline. Router had been unplugged, power cut. That wasn't an accident. That was sabotage. I pulled up my GIS software, plugged in my property coordinates, and double-checked the overlay. As expected, the new road cut directly through 4 acres of my land, which was legally designated for agricultural use and specifically exempt from any HOA covenant or jurisdiction. I wasn't one of them. I'd never signed their paperwork. I didn't owe them a damn thing. Then I found the note, taped to the inside of my back porch door in a woman's cursive handwriting that was trying way too hard to look friendly. Was this: "Dear property owner, due to urgent community development needs, we have temporarily utilized part of your open land for critical infrastructure access. This was conducted under advisement and for the benefit of all residents. Please understand this is a temporary measure. Thank you for your cooperation. AR Homeowners Board." I stared at it in disbelief. Temporarily utilized? What kind of deranged euphemism was that? Then I saw the signature at the bottom, Karen Milton, President, Aspen Ridge HOA. Of course it was Karen. Who else would think pouring a concrete artery through someone else's land without consent was just temporary use? I crumpled the note, dropped it in the sink, and let it soak under the faucet. The next morning, I called my neighbor Bill. He owned the adjacent parcel. Bill picked up on the first ring. "You're back," he said. I was wondering when you'd see it. You knew about this. They brought in the machines last Tuesday, said they had permission. Karen told us the previous owner had agreed to a road plan months ago. The previous owner, Hank Collins, the guy who moved to Florida a year ago, yeah, said it was pre-approved. Honestly, I thought you were on board with it. They had city-looking folks on site, vests, clipboards, everything. Bill, that's my land, and I sure as hell didn't approve any of it. Long pause. Then he just muttered, "Damn." That afternoon, I packed my file folders, deed, survey maps, permits, property designation records. I also charged the drone, flew it twice, and saved every second of video it captured, close-ups of the gate, signs, the torn-down fence, the new road. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I was too busy getting ready for war. The next morning, I drove straight into Aspen Ridge like I owned the place, which, ironically, I didn't, but apparently neither did they own mine. HOA headquarters, if you could call it that, was a beige converted garage at the edge of their community center, a glorified shed with hanging baskets, fake colonial trim, and more flags than sense. Outside stood a small sign, Aspen Ridge, HOA, office hours 9 to 2. It was 9:01. I parked right in front, walked in. The air smelled like cinnamon-scented candles and printer toner. A woman at the front desk blinked up at me with that practiced cheerfulness you learn from HOA seminars or cult retreats. "Good morning. How can we?" "I need to speak to Karen Milton." Her smile flickered. "And you are?" "Richard Morris. She'll know." The hesitation was brief. She disappeared behind a door, and 30 seconds later, Karen herself emerged in her perfectly ironed khakis and a salmon-colored polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered over her heart. Her hair was shellacked into a bob that hadn't moved since the Bush administration, and her face wore a look I knew well, suburban superiority mixed with mild irritation. "Mr. Morris," she said with a tight smile, "I was expecting you might stop by." "Then you already know why I'm here." She gestured toward a small conference table in the corner of the room. "Let's talk like civilized neighbors, shall we?" I didn't sit. She did. "I assume you've seen the road," she began. "Oh, I've seen it," I said. "The one you poured through the middle of my pasture, the one with your name on the signage, the one that tore down my fencing and crushed my irrigation." Karen clasped her hands. "Yes, well, about that. It's a temporary access route. We had an urgent infrastructure need, and your parcel provided the most logical pathway." "Let me stop you there. That's my land. You built on it without notice, consent, or even the decency of a phone call." Karen didn't flinch. "We received verbal confirmation from the previous owner. Hank sold the land a year ago. I bought it 6 months ago. That verbal confirmation, if it ever existed, expired with the sale." She gave a prim smile. "The community voted to approve emergency access. We didn't believe it would be an issue." I leaned forward just slightly. "Karen, do you know who I am?" She blinked. "You said your name was—" "I mean what I did before I moved here. I was with the zoning department for Rutherford County for 13 years. I've seen every kind of land use violation and fraud there is. You're not the first person who thought the ends justify the concrete. You broke the law." Her jaw tightened. "Mr. Morris, if you believe an error occurred—" "An error?" I barked a laugh. "You poured 40 yards of concrete across private farmland, installed electric lighting, and erected signs declaring it your property. That's not an error. That's calculated." She stood up now, posture stiff. "Look, this road services 19 homes. You may not realize it, but your property cuts us off from our expansion lots. Without access, future development stalls. Emergency vehicles can't get through easily. Our original easement plan was denied by the county because of the creek bed to the south." "Not my problem." "Your refusal to accommodate the community is selfish." "My refusal to tolerate felony-level trespassing is legal." Karen's smile dropped. "Entirely. You'll need to pursue this through the appropriate legal channels. But be aware, we've already consulted counsel. If you interfere with the road, we'll be forced to seek an injunction." "I'll take my chances." As I turned to leave, she added, "The road's not going anywhere, Mr. Morris." I stopped at the door. I wasn't asking. I left with my pulse steady, but my fists clenched. The audacity of this woman was next level. She'd spoken to me like she was granting me an allowance to be mad, Like she didn't just commit one of the most egregious land grabs I'd ever seen. By the time I got home, I was done playing nice. I wrote up a formal cease and desist letter citing state trespassing laws, property code violations, unlawful improvements on private land, and property damage due to unpermitted construction. I mailed it to the HOA, emailed it to their generic contact page, and hand-delivered a copy to the same front desk I'd walked into that morning. Then I filed an official police report for trespassing, destruction of private property, and unpermitted construction activity. Next, I contacted the county zoning board and submitted a complaint with the property overlays, drone footage, and photographs I'd compiled the day before. And finally, I emailed every local news station within 50 miles with a short message. Aspen Ridge HOA builds unauthorized concrete road across private farmland. Owner not informed. Full story, maps, and drone footage available on request. Contact Richard Morris. Within 2 hours, Channel 9 emailed back. I booked an interview for Monday. That night, I installed new wireless cameras, this time with cloud backup. I wasn't going to let them pull another offline weekend project stunt. They thought they'd bulldozed over some quiet ex-farmer. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Monday started with a knock. Not at the door, on my inbox. The zoning office replied to my complaint faster than expected. The response was short and deadly. No permit has been filed, reviewed, or approved for road construction on parcel number 4, 42-17A, Morris Richard. Any roadway, grading, or structural work conducted is unauthorized under County Code 5.7, Article 3. That was all I needed to kick things into overdrive. I spent the next 2 hours diving into the public records database like a bloodhound. Aspen Ridge's HOA website had a transparency tab, probably designed to keep up appearances rather than actually inform anyone. Still, they'd posted the minutes from the last 4 board meetings. I scanned them line by line, looking for any mention of the road, a budget vote, or construction scheduling. Nothing. No vote. No approval. Not even a vague reference to infrastructure improvements. That made the next discovery even more interesting. I traced the construction company listed on a small utility flag still left near the edge of the concrete. The tag read Delta Roads LLC. I looked them up, registered to Brandon Kinney. A quick LinkedIn search revealed that Brandon Kinney was married to none other than Lindsay Kinney Milton, Karen's daughter. I stared at the screen in disbelief for a few seconds, then I leaned back in my chair and let out a low whistle. She had funneled HOA funds directly into her son-in-law's pocket. No bid, no contract, no community approval, just pure nepotism. I saved the business registry, archived LinkedIn screenshots, and took notes on every digital breadcrumb I could find. Then I made a few calls to my former colleagues at the zoning board and a friend still working with the county auditor's office. I didn't ask for favors. I just let them know I had evidence of unpermitted construction and potential financial impropriety by a homeowner association president. The next step was to follow the money. I requested a copy of Aspen Ridge HOA's financial reports. As a non-member, they technically had no obligation to share them with me. But I knew how to phrase the request just right. Under Section 66-27-107 of the Tennessee Nonprofit Corporation Act, financial records used for public purposes must be accessible upon written inquiry if said funds impact surrounding property owners. They didn't respond. So I went one better. I visited 3 of the HOA's own residents, people whose names I'd recognized from the public meeting minutes. They were surprised to see me, but polite. I brought coffee, a notepad, and a neutral expression. Turns out none of them had known about the road before the day the bulldozers arrived. One of them, a retired librarian named Ms. Adkins, actually said, "Wait, that was on your land?" Karen told us it was a municipal easement that the county would maintain. I nearly laughed. A municipal easement through a privately owned agricultural zone? Ms. Adkins offered to forward me the last HOA newsletter, which, sure enough, described the road as a planned emergency access route secured by a previously negotiated right-of-way with adjacent parcels. No parcel was named, no map, just vague language intended to lull people into nodding along. She didn't stop there. She showed me a scanned PDF that Karen had emailed the board, an internal plan for Phase 2 expansion. In it, my land was labeled as Public Use Corridor, access optionality subject to future agreement. My jaw locked. I wasn't subject to agreement. I owned the damn land. I took screenshots, photos, copied file names, preserved metadata. By the end of the day, I had a neat, disturbing folder growing on my desktop called Aspen Fraud. Tuesday morning, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. Remove your public statements or face defamation suit. Last warning. KMI didn't respond. I forwarded it to my attorney and then to a journalist named Denise Mulligan at Channel 9, who had already scheduled the on-site interview with me for that afternoon. She and her cameraman met me at noon by the wrecked gate. I wore my boots, work shirt, and the calmest damn expression I could muster. I showed them the road, the damage to the land, the surveillance being reinstalled. Then I laid out the documentation, the lack of permits, the false HOA statements, the family connection between Karen and the construction firm, and the deliberate deception of HOA residents. Denise didn't even blink. She just whispered to her cameraman, "Get this B-roll from 3 angles. We're leading with it at 6. By the time they left, I had 4 voicemails, 2 from reporters I'd never heard of, 1 from the county zoning board requesting a formal complaint filing in writing, and 1 from a very nervous-sounding man named Todd. In fact, Treasurer Todd, per the HOA minutes. He asked if we could talk. I texted back 1 sentence, "Only with your lawyer present." By sunset, I'd sent everything to the county prosecutor's office. I included a cover letter with a polite, concise subject line, "Possible HOA misuse of funds and land trespass, Aspen Ridge Development." And I ended it with a simple sentence, "I'm a former zoning enforcement officer. I know what I'm looking at." The next morning, the prosecutor called me personally. I was on my 2nd cup of coffee Wednesday morning when I got served. A man in khakis and mirrored sunglasses knocked on my door, asked for Richard Morris, and handed me a thick white envelope with a forced smile like he was delivering a pizza. I thanked him, mostly out of habit, then closed the door and slid it open with my thumb. It was a lawsuit. Filed in County Civil Court. Plaintiff, Aspen Ridge Homeowners Association. Defendant, me. I scanned the pages. The language was bold, smug, and exactly what I expected from Karen Milton's playbook. The suit alleged that I had knowingly interfered with the HOA's lawful emergency access construction. My property had not been adequately posted or fenced, therefore could be reasonably interpreted as shared or cooperative use land, minus my failure to respond at the time of construction constituted implicit permission, and my personal favorite, that the removal of the road would cause irreparable harm to the infrastructure integrity of Aspen Ridge. They requested an injunction, barring me from disturbing the road, a restraining order preventing me from accessing the HOA adjacent parcel of my own property, and claimed damages exceeding $75,000 due to potential impact on real estate valuation. I closed the folder, stared at the ceiling, then burst out laughing so hard I nearly choked on the coffee. 10 minutes later, I called my attorney, Jennifer Brower. She's the type who doesn't smile unless she's in court. Former city litigator, now full-time legal chainsaw for anyone tangled up in zoning hell. She answered on the 2nd ring. "Tell me you've got something good," she said. "They're suing me," I said. "Excellent," she replied. "Now we get discovery." Jennifer's legal response was brutal, immediate, and surgical. She filed a countersuit within 24 hours. Trespassing on private agricultural land, destruction of fencing and water infrastructure, unpermitted construction, defamation via public HOA documents, fraudulent misrepresentation of land status. She demanded the full removal of the road, financial restitution for the damage, and punitive damages for the malicious abuse of civil process. Then she dropped the hammer, a formal motion requesting sanctions against the HOA and their attorney for filing a frivolous and retaliatory civil claim lacking statutory basis. That's lawyer speak, for this is bullshit and you know it. We served it right back to them with a smile. But I wasn't finished, not even close. I went down to the county records office in person. It's amazing what HOA boards forget when they rely too heavily on neighborhood intimidation and not enough on actual governance. The registrar helped me pull up the original parcel filings for Aspen Ridge, their master development plan, site diagrams, access easements. As expected, their development stopped just short of my land. No easement across my property had ever been recorded. In fact, the only access plan they had officially filed was the one that had been rejected by the county 2 years ago for being too close to a wetland preserve to the south, which meant they had no legal route in and no workaround. I was the bottleneck, and instead of negotiating or buying an easement like civilized developers, they poured concrete without asking and expected I'd roll over. I made copies of everything. Official stamps, planning notations, all of it. I dropped one set off with Jennifer and another with the prosecutor, who had already opened a preliminary inquiry. And then something unexpected happened. I got a call from a woman named Denise Adkins. We'd met briefly the week before when I stopped by her house. She was a retired librarian and one of the only people in Aspen Ridge who had greeted me like a human being. Her voice on the phone was shaky but determined. "Mr. Morris," she said, "I thought you should know. Karen held an emergency HOA board meeting last night. It wasn't on the schedule. Only a few people were notified, but I attended." "And?" I asked. "She was trying to pass a special vote. Retroactive authorization for the road. After the fact, no one else even knew it was being considered. Was there a quorum? Number barely 6 of us. One guy left after 5 minutes. She kept trying to push the vote through anyway. She said she had legal coverage, but it didn't sit right, so I recorded the meeting. That made me sit up." "You did what?" "I recorded the whole thing on my phone. Audio. I'm sending it to you. And I want to testify. I don't like what she's doing." 15 minutes later, I had a clear recording of Karen Milton coaching board members on how to fake prior approval, referencing old verbal agreements, and openly mocking the legal gymnastics required to backdate documents. I forwarded the file to Jennifer and the county prosecutor. The same day, I got an email from Channel 9. They were running the story at 6 o'clock sharp. The teaser read, "HOA versus Farmer, did a homeowners group pour a concrete road across private land without permission? We investigate the scandal behind the pavement." I sat on my porch as the sun dipped behind the treetops, a glass of bourbon in hand, and watched the lights of Aspen Ridge flicker in the distance like a cheap LED halo. The road was still there, but not for long. The sun hadn't even cleared the ridge the next morning when I got a call from the county prosecutor's office. They wanted to schedule an official site visit, not just to inspect the road, but to confirm the claims I'd made regarding fraudulent filings and unpermitted construction. I told them I'd meet them there. I also invited Channel 9. When I rolled up to the site 30 minutes later, the scene already looked like a press briefing. 2 county vehicles were parked off to the side, marked with zoning and land use logos. A Channel 9 van was setting up a tripod, and there, standing awkwardly near the edge of the concrete, was Karen Milton, wearing a salmon-colored pantsuit, dark glasses, and a look that screamed damage control. I stepped out of my truck with a manila folder under one arm and a smile that was about as genuine as the HOA's building permit. The prosecutor, a no-nonsense woman named Ellie Grant, approached me with a handshake and a clipboard. "Mr. Morris, thanks for meeting us. We've reviewed your complaint. I'd like to take a look at the installation." We walked the length of the road, roughly 300 feet of gray concrete cut straight through my lower pasture. The fencing was still gone, replaced with cheap solar-powered bollards. A few scattered tire marks showed where HOA residents had already started using it as a shortcut. Karen trailed behind us with a clipboard of her own, muttering under her breath. Ellie stopped at the midpoint and glanced at the base of one of the bollards. "This lighting was installed without inspection," she said flatly. "That alone violates half a dozen ordinances." I handed her the parcel maps, including the planning overlay and the rejected access easement proposal from 2 years ago. She nodded, flipping through each page with the calm of someone preparing an autopsy. "And your fencing?" she asked. "Cut and bulldozed," I said. "No notice, no contact. Just gone." Channel 9's reporter, a young guy named Zach with a perfect jawline and too much moose, asked if I'd be willing to do an on-camera interview. I agreed. I didn't hold back. I explained that I'd purchased this land in good faith, registered it as agricultural, paid my taxes, followed zoning laws. And then one day, I came home to find that a concrete artery had been poured through it, like it was nothing more than an empty lot on a monopoly board. I made it clear I wasn't trying to block development, but I damn sure it wasn't going to let someone steal my land under the guise of community benefit. Karen tried to interject, waving a stack of documents she said supported her version of events. Ellie shut that down fast. "We'll let the court decide the validity of these filings," she said. "But for now, you're instructed to cease any further use of this road until this matter is fully resolved." Karen's jaw tightened like a vice. "This is essential access. You can't expect us to shut it down." Ellie raised an eyebrow. I expect you to follow the law. That night, Jennifer filed a formal request for emergency relief, a motion to authorize me to dismantle the road immediately, citing ongoing trespass and environmental concerns. We attached the planning documents, the fraudulent HOA filings, Denise's audio recording, and statements from 2 more HOA residents who had come forward after seeing the news segment. By Friday morning, the judge had signed the order. It was crystal clear. The respondent, Richard Morris, is the sole legal owner of Parcel 238J, including all improvements made thereon without his express written consent. The unauthorized roadway constitutes a direct violation of his property rights. The court hereby grants emergency relief. Full removal is authorized, effective immediately. I didn't waste a second. At 9 a.m., I had a licensed demolition crew on site, flanked by a bonded hauling service. By 9:15, a concrete saw was winding through the first slab. By noon, the entire center section had been jackhammered into rubble. Karen showed up mid-afternoon, shrieking like the brakes on a dump truck. She brought a rent-a-cop from a private firm who seemed to realize about 30 seconds in that he'd been called to enforce absolutely nothing. "This is illegal," she yelled. I handed her a laminated copy of the judge's order. "You can laminate fraud, too," she snapped. The officer read the page, then handed it back to her without a word. By sunset, 2/3 of the road had been pulverized, loaded into steel containers, and hauled off. We laid down fresh soil over the path, reseeded the area, and set a new gate in place with steel posts, cameras, and motion-triggered lights. A big wooden sign stood at the edge of the drive. "Private land. Trespassers will be prosecuted. This means you, HOA." I slept like a baby that night. The road was gone, but the war wasn't over. The morning after the demolition, I woke up to find a certified letter shoved into my mailbox, red-stamped and full of smug legalese. It was from the HOA's law firm, Beckman & Lowe, the kind of outfit that smells like overpriced conference rooms and cold coffee. The letter accused me of willful destruction of community infrastructure and warned that the HOA would be seeking damages in excess of $100,000. I laughed out loud reading it. Damages for destroying something they had no right to build in the first place? Still, I took it seriously. You never underestimate an enemy with a budget and an overinflated sense of entitlement. I sent the letter straight to Jennifer, my attorney, and by lunchtime she had already filed a preemptive response, a motion to dismiss, citing the court order authorizing the demolition and reinforcing that no easement had ever been granted. But the HOA wasn't done. That afternoon, Karen went full scorched earth. First, they tried to repaint the situation in the press. A post went up on the HOA's Facebook page, complete with heavily cropped photos of the broken road, a long-winded caption about loss of essential services, and, of course, a plea for community donations to fight back against a rogue landowner, threatening our neighborhood's safety. I replied with my own post, side-by-side photos of the deed, the survey, and a 10-second drone video of the demolition, all entirely legal. Then I posted the judge's order. Karen deleted the HOA's post within the hour. Then came the petitions. A couple of Karen's loyalists, including one guy who looked like he ironed his socks, started going door to door in the development, collecting signatures demanding I restore access and reimburse the HOA for the cost of reconstruction. Neighbor from the eastern border, an older guy named Paul who raises chickens, texted me. They came to my door, told them to shove their clipboard. He added a chicken emoji for good measure, and just when I thought the day couldn't get any more absurd, 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies showed up at my gate, not to arrest me, thank God, but to follow up on a complaint. Apparently, Karen had filed a police report claiming I'd destroyed vital infrastructure and endangered the neighborhood. One deputy, a tall guy with a salt and pepper beard and the weary eyes of someone who's heard it all, asked to see the court order. I handed it to him. He read the first paragraph, handed it back, and said, "You'd be surprised how often we get called for stuff like this. HOA drama is half this county's business." The other deputy just chuckled and said, "Looks like you're the one playing by the book here. We're good." They left without incident, but I could tell Karen wasn't going to give up just because the law wasn't on her side. That week, Jennifer dug up something interesting, the concrete contract for the road. It wasn't even signed by the HOA board. It had been executed by Karen alone in her role as president. No meeting minutes, no vote, no oversight. Worse, the payment had come out of a reserve fund that was supposed to be earmarked for storm drain repairs. She'd siphoned $240,000 for an illegal vanity project, and no one in the HOA had even known. We decided to go nuclear. Jennifer drafted a complaint to the state HOA regulatory board, the county auditor's office, and, most importantly, the district attorney. We attached everything: the unauthorized expense, the fake site plan, the prior court filings, and sworn statements from two whistleblowing HOA board members who had finally realized they were being used. Meanwhile, I made another drone video. This one flew over the now cleared land, zoomed in on the fresh fencing, then cut to a screen showing Karen's bogus complaint and the official court order side by side. I didn't say a word in the video, just let the facts speak. It went viral in the county. And then came the subpoena. 3 days later, the subpoena landed on Karen's doorstep like a brick through a window. It came from the district attorney's office and was addressed not just to her as HOA president, but to her personally. The charges? Fraudulent use of community funds, filing false records with the county, and knowingly trespassing on private property. I got the news from Jennifer while I was checking the irrigation lines near the fence line. She called and simply said, "She's cooked. The DA's opening an investigation and it's public now." Public. That word tasted better than coffee. An hour later, it hit the news. Local Channel 6 ran a piece titled "HOA President Under Investigation After Road Built Across Private Farmland." They included footage from my drone video and even interviewed Paul, my chicken-raising neighbor, who happily declared she tried to roll over Richard's land like it was some Monopoly game. Guess who's going to jail? The fallout was instant. By that evening, the HOA board held an emergency Zoom meeting, and for the first time, I got an invite. Not as a member, of course, but as a concerned adjacent landowner. I clicked in out of sheer curiosity. There they were, Karen pale and rigid, Vice President Allen sweating bullets, and a bunch of board members who looked like they'd just realized they were passengers on the Titanic. Karen opened the call like nothing had happened, launching into a stiff monologue about external legal complications and temporary setbacks in infrastructure planning. I let her ramble for about a minute before I unmuted myself. "Karen," I said, "you built a road on land you didn't own, lied about it, used HOA funds without approval, and now the DA wants your head. You might want to rethink the whole nothing to see here strategy." Silence. Then Allen finally spoke. "Karen, did you really sign that contract without a board vote?" she stammered. "I had implied authority. It was urgent. The project was for the good of—" "You stole $250,000, I cut in, and buried it under my soil." I left the call after that. Let them stew in it. The next morning, I found out from Jennifer that 2 board members had filed official affidavits stating Karen had unilaterally moved forward with the road project, had never disclosed the true property line, and had doctored the site map in the meeting packet. One of them, a woman named Teresa, actually came by my gate that afternoon. She looked mortified. She apologized, said she felt duped. I didn't sugarcoat anything for her. Told her the only reason I wasn't suing each of them personally was because they had the good sense to come clean now. That evening, the county auditor released a preliminary statement. Misappropriation of HOA funds was likely deliberate and had clear intent to circumvent legal zoning and land use boundaries. Karen hadn't just bent a few rules. She'd committed felonies. And just like that, the HOA board voted to remove her from the presidency in a closed session. Not that it mattered much. By then, she was under formal criminal investigation. But I wasn't done yet. I filed a civil suit for damages, not just for the land disruption, but for emotional distress, legal fees, and the forced downtime on my agricultural operations. And then I did something she never saw coming. I offered to sell the easement she so badly wanted to the county for 10 times what the HOA could have afforded. The county was interested. And Karen, she was too busy lawyering up. By the end of the month, my property was back to looking like it should. Wide open, clean, peaceful. Where HOA floodlights once stood, I now had grass reseeded and temporary fencing back in place while I prepped the pasture for new cattle. But the real work was happening in the courtroom. Karen's arraignment drew a crowd. Local news vans packed the front of the county courthouse like it was the trial of the year. And honestly, in our sleepy part of Tennessee, it might as well have been. She showed up in a wrinkled blazer and too much makeup, trying to look composed. But you could see it in her eyes. Panic, disbelief, the realization that this was no longer a neighborhood spat. This was prison time. The charges read out loud were music to my ears. Falsification of land use records, misuse of HOA funds, conspiracy to commit trespass, and willful destruction of agricultural property. When the prosecutor brought up the fake map, her contractor husband, yes, turns out he was the one who drafted it, used to pour the road, the judge raised an eyebrow so high I thought it might detach. But the real nail in the coffin came from the forensic accountant. HOA residents had been asking for transparency about their dues for years. Karen had always claimed everything was properly documented. Turns out, not only had she funneled over $240,000 into her nephew's construction firm, but she'd also billed the HOA for unrelated consulting expenses under a fake LLC registered in another state. The HOA board members who'd previously defended her turned state's witness one by one. It was like watching a dam crack wide open. Each day brought another confession, another leak, another scandal, small fund transfers, off-the-books meetings, intimidation of dissenting homeowners, and her smugness, gone, buried under subpoenas. After a 2-week trial, the jury took less than 4 hours to return a verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge didn't sugarcoat it. You used your authority to manipulate public records, infringe on private property, and embezzle funds. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a willful campaign of deception. Sentence: 6 years in state prison with no chance of parole before serving at least 4. She cried. I didn't. Meanwhile, the HOA was placed under independent oversight by a court-appointed administrator. The members held a re-election, and for the first time in years, people started attending meetings willingly. One of the new board's first moves: a formal apology to me, delivered in writing with a check attached. I got back every dollar I spent removing that concrete, plus $80,000 in compensation for damages and legal costs. And the cherry on top, the county accepted my easement deal. They're building a proper access road now, outside my property line. I sold the back 5 acres of my land to a cattleman friend for triple what I paid for them. He was thrilled to inherit ground with such a dramatic history. You sure this road won't come back from the dead? He joked. If it does, I said, tell it I still have the sledgehammer. As for me, I took the rest of the payout, bought a brand new tractor, and finally had the time to rebuild the barn the way I wanted. No HOA, no trespassers, no concrete scars across my pasture. Just me, my land, and peace that no board vote could ever touch.